Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and we are so happy you can join us today. Affordable housing requirements in New Jersey have been debated for decades. The Fair Housing Act lays out affordable housing requirements for every town in New Jersey. And there's a state senator looking for ways to change the law and provide relief for some towns. State Senator Joe Pinocchio is standing by. First, though, a new bill in the state Senate would help workers learn new skills to help advance their careers and make more money. It's called the New Jersey Works Act, and one of the bill's sponsors joins me now. State Senator Troy Singleton, a Democrat from the 7th Legislative District, which takes in parts of Burlington County. Senator, it's so good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the bill. It really encourages partnerships between businesses, schools, nonprofits. So can you tell us a little bit about what it is and how it would work?
Sure. The purpose of the program is to recruit, prepare, and educate individuals for entry-level jobs with, we believe, to have long-term career potential through these paid training programs that the bill sets up. So we target individuals predominantly from low and moderate income households and current workers in need of skills development, which I think the greatest asset that we have in business today is our human capital. So the investments in making our workers and helping our workers to grow the skills they need to learn to earn, as it were, I think really helps our general business climate as well as our workforce development initiatives.
Well, there seem to be a lot of help wanted signs everywhere and for entry-level jobs, but still sometimes people aren't getting the jobs because they don't have a lot of skills or they don't have that experience. So how can this legislation help somebody who is in a low-skilled job?
Well, we know, quite frankly, that there's a successful pathway from low-wage jobs to higher-wage jobs by upskilling workers. So programs that, like the one that we're designing here, whose sole purpose is to really engage our workers at the level they are and elevate them, allows them to qualify for greater economic opportunity and job growth. We're thrilled to have partners all throughout both the labor and business communities who see the value in workforce development and workforce training. So this bill allows us to be able to do that in a pretty clear and concise way.
Yeah, you are somebody who's out and about in your district a lot. Was there any one person was there something that you were hearing or a story that said, you know what, we've got to get this training program, we've got to get this up and running? Like, what was the inspiration?
Laura, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like all businesses right now are clamoring for workers. And when I engage a lot, when I go out and talk to business owners, I do my main street walks, I talk to chambers of commerces locally. They're all saying, Troy, we just need more folks to come through the door that want to work for us. And I'm realizing that we have to do more to make sure that we have a program in place that creates the sort of job training that'll be necessary to take young workers and other workers looking to refine their skills and allow them to continue to grow and matriculate in their endeavors. That's what this program is about, helping understand the concept of learning to earn and giving folks the skills necessary to continue on their growth path.
Right, especially at a young age when you get in that habit and when you start to develop those skills, it's a good foundation that can just grow. Can you talk a little bit about how the training program would work? And, because there is training involved, is there a source of payment? Who would pay for that?
Sure. The bill would require training programs to offer no less than about 12 weeks of paid training for each participant. And it would include, but not be limited to, training and instruction in basic math and English literacy and communication skills, those soft skills that businesses need. Additionally, critical thinking, leadership, life skills, and job readiness skills are a part of the training curriculum. So trainings would be paid the state's minimum wage following successful completion of that program. So the way it provides the financial incentives for businesses to partner in this regard, participating businesses would be entitled to receive credits against their corporation business tax or gross income tax, depending on how they're set up, for 100% of financial assistance provided to support a qualified pre-employment and work readiness training program. So that's how we pay for it, and that's the sort of how it matriculates the understanding for workers to get the training they need.
Yeah. So what's been the response so far in the community? Because you're looking to partner with schools, with nonprofits, with businesses. How's the community been so far? And I know it's a proposed piece of legislation, but how's the community been receptive and working with you on this?
Oh, it's been great. There's a hunger, individual saying, "Hey, let's get this going tomorrow. Like we need this now." So we're seeing so much support, not just from our local chambers of commerce and state chambers and all the business groups, but from so many of in the higher education space. Many of our community colleges have been actively engaged in saying this could really work in concert with the work that we're doing to provide the education on our community colleges campuses. So we're incredibly excited about what this can mean. It's starting this journey now. We're really excited where it could end up.
Yeah, and also getting past the stigma of, well, you have to go to, after you graduate high school, you have to go to college or you have to go to community college. That isn't always a good fit for even incredibly intelligent people. That isn't always the right fit. So there's sometimes a stigma about going into the workforce as opposed into higher education. But and it's expensive to go into no matter what college you go to, schooling.
Lord, you're absolutely right. As someone who grew up in organized labor movement and still carries my union carpenter card, I can tell you apprenticeship programs and programs like this Workforce Development Initiative change lives. Folks get an opportunity to earn college credits and get that chance to really move forward with their career without being saddled with any sort of debt that can slowly put these roadblocks for them to advance. We're excited about the possibility of what this can mean for workers in the state of New Jersey and for employers. And we look forward to getting it going.
Yeah, I want to also ask about another piece of legislation you've proposed. It's a 20% income tax deduction for small business owners. We know how difficult small businesses has had things, especially since COVID. So can you talk a little bit about how this would work and where the bill is in the process?
So the bill was recently introduced, so it's still in committee right now, and we're hopeful to get that process moving as well on that particular piece of legislation. But what it does, it looks at a particular piece of federal legislation that many are familiar with, the Federal Jobs and Tax Cuts Act, which President Trump and others initiated several years ago. There's a particular piece of that bill where a federal deduction is allowed for businesses to be able, especially small businesses, and it depends on how they're set up, to be able to use this deduction against their federal income tax. That sort of sunsets in 2026. So many of those that would go away for many of those businesses. And in my conversations with folks from the National Federation of Independent Businesses, our New Jersey chapter, and so many other small businesses, that's been a game changer in allowing them to have other resources they need to put back in their business to help that business grow. What I'm saying is New Jersey should take a page out of that book, knowing it is going to sunset, and allow a similar deduction for our state taxes. If you're a business and you pay your taxes through your income tax or through the corporation business tax, let's allow that deduction to happen as well in our state. We think if we do that, we continue to jumpstart and sustain the greatest employers in our state, which are our small businesses. If we're serious about affecting change on Main Street, we got to be intentional about doing it. And that legislation does that.
And our small businesses, are they all aware of this? You're mentioning things that are sunsetting. Are they necessarily even aware of what's happening?
So I think that's always the challenge, right? We know because we follow this stuff on the federal level that it does sunset, and many of their trade associations are going out telling folks. But there are a lot of businesses who aren't associated with any trade association who would never know that. So this opportunity to talk about it is critically important, and we'll continue to talk about it with all of our small business partners.
Can you talk a little bit about just kind of your philosophy and how important it is for you to get out and about? I mean, I look at your social media page and you're not just stuck in Trenton, even though it's budget time and a lot of time is being spent there. You make it a real priority to continue to be out and about in your community. So can you talk a little bit about why that's so important and how that is inspiring what it is you do in Trenton?
So, put simply, Laura, my maturation as a legislator has been greatly influenced by the one-on-one conversations I have with my bosses, and that's the over 250,000 people I work for in the seventh district. When I get to talk to them at their jobs, in the park, or in our barbershops, or wherever else we go, when I get to talk to them in their own environment, folks will give you a perspective on the work that we're doing in Trenton that you don't get, right, when you're just sitting in almost an echo chamber that is the State House sometimes. And you get to hear the real impacts of the work you're doing, but also the things that we need to do to really put positive change in the lives of people that I'm so honored and humbled to work for as their state senator. So for me, it is an obligation of mine as their employee to actually hear what my bosses want me to do. And that's why I spend so much time out in my community talking to folks and trying to better understand how my role in our representative democracy can make their lives better.
But not everybody, I mean, you're a public servant, but not everybody does look at it that way. They get, again, stuck a little bit in that rut. So what helps keep you fresh and motivated and not going to that, side where you're comfortable in an office?
So I think a lot of it is just my personal nature. I enjoy conversation. I enjoy talking to people about things that we can do to make our system and our world better. I believe collaboration and consensus are the best ways to make public policy work for everybody. Doesn't mean we always agree, but I've always given folks a willing ear to hear their case. And frankly, sometimes to try and change my mind or to reinforce that what I'm thinking and what I'm saying is exactly the right thing. That's been immeasurable to my growth, those conversations. And for me, it is about being a public servant. That is my obligation to serve the public, and I take it really serious. And I can't serve the public if I don't know what they want. And that's why those conversations are really helpful.
Okay, so final thoughts as we wrap up here. Anything on the horizon this summer that you plan on doing or getting involved with or looking forward to outside the State
Well,
House?
we're looking forward to our annual event that we do every summer. We've been doing it since the pandemic started, which is our summer food truck series, where we will go out into every community in the 7th district, and we will provide lunch for kids who are food insecure during the summer. We've done it for several years now. We've had great partners who've been with us, and we're always going to find a way to try and serve our community. And for me, as someone who grew up in this community, who grew up just serving my neighbors here in the 7th district, this district has meant the world to me, and my obligation is to continue to give back. So our summer food truck series will be back again. We're looking forward to doing it, as well as help some kids make sure they get a good meal this summer.
Right, right. Because not only are students in general, they're not getting that education support that they need and the mental health support, but sometimes people forget that the only source of nutrition sometimes is that they get when they are actually in the school building, or it's the most consistent source of nutrition that they're getting.
Absolutely right. So we trying to fill the gap when school's out, doing our small part. And we're always going to continue all of our service efforts. We'll do once a month. You'll see us in the community, definitely doing a Serve with Senator Singleton community service event where we crowdsource volunteers. So we're always excited to do those things.
All right. Well, State Senator Troy Singleton, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's always a pleasure, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Oh, you too. State Senator Joe Pennacchio is a Republican who represents the 26th Legislative District, which takes in parts of Essex and Morris County. We are happy to welcome Joe Pennacchio to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, so we're going to be talking about affordable housing in New Jersey. It's been a challenge and an issue for a very long time, and I'm not talking about affordability, but it's about affordable housing units. And there are a lot that are being built in recent years, but there are a lot of towns that are really struggling to find the space to be able to also support the strain that it puts on the local community when you put in these larger developments. So can you talk a little bit about the issue first?
Sure. Well, in order for these houses to be built, a lot of developers will come in and they'll say, we'll gladly build these houses. But for every one affordable unit that we build, we'll build 8 to 10 other units at market price. The problem is that the number of units become enormous for these towns to handle. And the uniqueness of those towns, the little quaint towns, it's just a challenge. At one time, there was regional contribution credits where it was sort of a mixture. You could build some affordable housing as needed, and then your obligation then could be paid off to some of the urban areas where, quite frankly, where the housing is needed. And that's where the people are. That's where the transportation is. That's where their jobs are located. That's where their families are. But they did away with that. So we've introduced legislation that these towns that are being challenged with these affordable housing issues could do up to 50% of what those challenges are through regional contribution credits.
Okay, so let's take even a step further back so people do understand. The New Jersey Supreme Court said many years ago in the Mount Laurel decision that every town has to provide a certain amount of low-income housing, and it started in Mount Laurel, New Jersey, when somebody was trying to move in and wasn't able to afford. Right. So now you have towns that must provide a certain percentage. But what are you finding that the biggest issue is? Is it it's not necessarily affordable housing being built, but the strain on resources in the town? Can you talk a little bit about the unintended consequences?
Sure, it's a number of units. And if a developer is going to build 8 to 10 times the number of units for every affordable unit, there's no place to put these units. And if you do put them up, then the strain on the infrastructure, the strain on the school system, the strain on the local property tax is tremendous. And again, the people that would benefit the most are the people in urban areas. So why not help them build some affordable housing in those communities where they live, where they recreate, where they work, and where public transportation is?
So currently, a town, they don't always get the financial support they need to upgrade their roads, to expand their schools, and to provide the resources needed for what is already in existence, as well as the onslaught of new members of the community.
Correct. I've worked closely with Mayor Mark Taylor from Florham Park. Right in the middle of their beautiful town is this huge complex to try to accommodate these affordable housing units. Nobody wants them there. Now, nobody's saying that we don't want to take care of the needs of the poor. They're perfectly willing to build units for the poor. What they don't want to do is build 8 to 10 times more units that are necessary, because some developer comes in and challenges them and says, we're going to build these affordable units, but you must also take these units as well. Then they go to the courts, and the courts, they may knock down some of the units, but at the end, they build way more units than are required.
So can you talk a little bit about the bill that amends the Fair Housing Act to help towns meet the needs? So what I'm hearing is that it's developers are coming in and doing more than that, because there's land, and if they have land, they want to fill it and make as much as possible. So how would your amendments to the Fair Housing Act work?
Well, even if there's no land, they'll build up. So you'll take units, where a master plan calls for X number of feet high, but the master plan goes out the door in order to satisfy their obligations. You had mentioned this is the fifth round. In 2025, we're going to go to the fifth round where this court-imposed number of units are going to happen. There's even a question as to whether or not we need those extra units in the state of New Jersey. I haven't seen anything that says that we need those extra hundreds of thousands of units throughout the state of New Jersey. Originally, the legislature, actually, this is the legislature's purview. Because the legislature did not act, what the court said is until the legislature acts, we're going to mandate what you can and can't do with these affordable units. So it's really in the legislature's court. The court doesn't want to do this, but the court has no option because the legislature's failed to act. Up until I think it was 2006 or 2008, we had these regional contribution agreements where we could send money to some of those urban areas where they desperately need that housing, and that would go towards your COA obligation. So again, working with Mark Taylor from Florham Park, who knows firsthand the challenges that he faces with these, we've said, okay, we'll still take on half of that obligation, but up to half of the obligation can be done with regional contribution agreements. Now, at one time, the argument against that was that it was still exclusionary. Whether it is or it's not, there's safeguards that we built into the bill that the Department of Community Affairs, as well as the Attorney General, have to look at the plan that's submitted and has to agree with it. If they don't agree with it, then they won't do it. So that way, if you had any bad actors that want to do exclusionary things to keep those low-income houses out, then either DCA or the Attorney General can just turn around and say no to the plan.
Right. And it's a fine line to walk, because people aren't upset about having an affordable unit. It again is those unintended consequences when you have an influx of new students in a school, and then the town has to raise property taxes. So are there cases, or can you talk to the argument about how affordable housing sometimes makes a community unaffordable for the middle class?
Well, it's not only unaffordable to the middle class, but take a look at the the people that move there. They need transportation. You need a car in New Jersey if you don't live in an urban area. A lot of times they don't have a car. What they don't exclude are the HOAs. They still have to pay HOAs. I think in Florham Park, even with the affordable units, they have to pay $600 a month just for the HOAs. So it sort of doesn't make any sense. I don't think this is very well planned out. Having those regional contribution credits go to the areas that are in need, at least would lighten the load up to half.
And what's the pushback? Because, like you said, like I remember, I live in Lambertville, and the mayor could say, "All right, we are obligated to build X amount. We don't have the need, so Trenton, we're going to give you our allotment and our money that goes to building those, and it's a win-win."
Right. I don't know what percentage they were allowed to do. So at that point, then I think the legislature determined that it was still exclusionary. So they did away with the whole RCA program, which they should not have done. So we want to bring back the RCA program in a limited manner, again with oversight. And the oversight is the DCA has to approve it, and so does the Attorney General, just to make sure that whatever that plan is for low-income housing, it is not excluding those poor people living in their neighborhoods.
Yeah. So, what other type of feedback have you gotten in the legislature for this? For this, because keeping your town affordable for all classes of people is something that all mayors across the state are struggling with.
Well, the mayors want it. Forget the legislature, because the mayors are the ones that deal with this. So I haven't met a mayor yet that doesn't think that their obligations for COA, even though it's not called COA anymore, but essentially it's still COA. The DCA runs it. I haven't met one that doesn't feel the challenge, and quite frankly, in many instances, just can't do it. Not to mention the enormous amount of money that they spend on lawyers trying to fight the number of units that are imposed on them.
Yeah, yeah. And what about state legislators? What are they? How much of a priority is this?
Well, I think if you're a state legislature where most of your districts are in the suburban and rural areas, you probably agree with my legislation. There is a note of hesitancy because of the exclusionary potential that they cite. But again, if you have oversight by the Attorney General, and if you have oversight by DCA, and they put their stamp of approval on it, then at least you protected the process, and you know that the plan that's been worked out is sort of half of the units, and that will be allowed within those communities, and the other half goes to the communities that really need it. Keep in mind, if you need X number of units, you have to multiply that by 8 or 10 times if the developer is doing it. So it becomes an enormous strain on the community to do that.
Why is the developer doing that? If you say, all right, our town has to have 100 units of affordable housing, why are they building 800 and 900? Why?
Well, they would never be able to build those units if they went by the master plan, because it's all different site plan issues that are involved with those types of cluster housing. But what they'll do is they'll turn it around, they'll bring it to the courts, and they'll use the COA obligations as a means for them to get all those number of units approved.
And COA is the Council of Affordable Housing, right? CO.
Which no longer exists. I think the DCA
no longer.
Call it the fair housing, but it's essentially the same thing.
Right. Yeah. People, insiders in Trenton, they kind of throw these terms around, whether it's COA, the credits, Mount Laurel, but it all has to do with housing for low-income people.
Well, it's a very unpopular issue. So what you do is you just get rid of the name, and then that issue is not an issue anymore. Unfortunately, the ramifications are still there, and it's hurting the community. It's hurting all of my communities. None of my communities benefits from the system right now.
How optimistic are you that you're going to come to some type of agreement that will help towns and also at the same time still be able to provide housing to those individuals who desperately need housing?
Well, it's an uphill battle. But again, if we explain it not only to my mayors, because they're going to buy into it, I'm sure, but if we explain it to all the legislators and all the urban districts and saying, look, you can actually benefit from this. We want to help you with your housing obligations as well. And have the Attorney General and have the Department of Community Affairs take a look at the plan and say, this is a fair plan. You know, a town like Florham Park maybe doesn't have to build hundreds of units. Maybe they can build half of those units. And in the meantime, some of the urban areas will benefit as well. The ones that won't like it are the developers, because they're the ones that wind up building 8 and 10 times more units than necessary in order to satisfy the obligations for low income housing. That way, they can build their units as well.
Okay. I know we've talked a lot about affordable housing. There is other legislation that you're working on, and one other bill that would help homeowners deal with lead and asbestos. So can you talk a little bit about that?
It's a major issue. Years ago, we didn't know what the ramifications were with lead, especially in paint, in pipes, and to remediate that issue costs an awful lot of money. So what the state does, the state mandates that you mediate it, and then they say, you're on your own. You have to do it on your own. We're giving credits, tax credits up to, on your tax return for people that do remediate that issue, just trying to help them along.
Okay. Finally, one other piece of legislation that you're sponsoring, recently signed by the governor, designating January as Muslim Heritage Month. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. It's brought to our attention that type of resolution didn't exist. And there's a significant population of Muslims in our state, all mostly law-abiding, good citizens, contributing to the American dream. And sometimes it's just nice if you just pat them on the back and say thank you, and point out all those contributions that they have done. No different than any other classes that exist in our country. We're a melting pot, so we recognize others. It's time now to recognize them as well.
Yeah. Never a dull moment. There's a lot going on, a lot of moving pieces. So, Senator, we thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Well, thank you for having me on.
All right. And we thank you for joining us on New Jersey Politics. I am Laura Jones, and we look forward to seeing you back here next time.